Item 4.3 is a presentation and update on the City of Superior's Master Broadband Plan.
Our presenters, I believe I just saw log on to the digital meeting, Devin Cox and Jeff Christensen. Welcome, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you. Do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes.
Group?
Yes, you do.
Okay. In a second, let me see if I can only find out how to do that. Sorry about this.
Present
there
now.
we go. Okay, there you go. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. We've got a very short slide deck to go through with and present, and then we'll open it up for questions. And feel free to write down any questions you have as we go through these slides, and then we'll make sure we spend the time to answer your questions. Okay. We wanted to cover a couple of things. So the recommendation of the Master Broadband Plan is that the City of Superior deploy a fiber optic infrastructure network, okay, for the purposes of opening up that network in an open access model, and then allow ISPs, internet service providers, and other service providers to come utilize that digital road system and offer services to the residents and businesses of Superior. Okay? The reason why we're recommending fiber is just simply because of the capacity comparisons of fiber to other mediums that are known today. So we want to go through that real quick. DSL, if it's upgraded, can do a capacity, it has a capacity and speeds of up to about 100 megabits on its download maximum. Okay, that's your old twisted pair, telephone lines, right? Starlink, which is a relatively new technology, low orbit satellites, the testing for Starlink has generated speeds between 50 and 150 megabits per second. So that's right in the same ballpark as DSL at its maximum. Cable, the coax platform, can deliver a 1 gigabit connection speeds, again, if it's upgraded to the latest technology in cable. And then 5G, which of course you don't have a Superior yet, and the standards aren't quite fleshed out, quite established, but most of the experts are talking about a 2 gigabit throughput speed. And then you have fiber in comparison. And fiber today commercially can do 25 terabits of data transfer a second, which is basically 25 million megabits. And in the lab, in tests running over about a 5-mile distance, they've been able to push 156 terabytes of data per second. So most experts not only conclude that there's nothing that even comes close to fiber's capacity today, but we haven't even seen the horizon of where we will end up in the future. Okay, so that's why, because not only is fiber essentially the only medium that will be able to deliver the applications that are just around the corner, but it's also, in most people's opinions, the only future-proof medium of what the future will bring. Okay. As far as the market analysis in Superior, there are two primary carriers. There's a WISP, a wireless ISP, but most of the subscribers in Superior subscribe to Spectrum or CenturyLink. Okay. And you can see there we've documented the current plans as advertised on each of their websites. And then we've also, next to that, put the actual amounts that people, from an averaging perspective, that people in Superior are paying And that's based on an analysis that we did of invoices that were submitted to us by residents and by businesses. So you can see here, and this is not uncommon, we see this very common. The most popular plan by far is 100 by 10 megabits. And they advertise a $55, promotional rate and a $75 standard rate. Most people in Superior are paying an average, on average, everyone's paying $86 for that. And then, of course, you can see CenturyLink. And then the business plans are very similar, but they're just more expensive. And you can see there kind of, where the rates fall and where the rates are advertised. Okay. The one thing we wanted to point out, one of the businesses in Superior shared with us a proposal that they were given by CenturyLink to actually run fiber to their business. And CenturyLink was willing to do that, deliver a half a gigabit speed, so 100 megabits of speed, and they're willing to do that for $925 a month if they were willing to sign a 60-month contract, which that contract would have been, essentially the amount of that contract would have been $55,550. Just to give you kind of a comparison of fiber offerings today in Superior. Okay. So if we actually consolidate all the numbers down to what are people in Superior paying residential and business plans for a megabit of download speed, you can see that they're paying anywhere on Spectrum, anywhere from $1.22 down to 15 cents. Okay, and most people are paying right here at the 87 cents, and you can see on CenturyLink it's quite a bit more. And then businesses, you can tell the same thing. If Superior decides to move forward with a fiber network infrastructure plan as being proposed, we anticipate the cost will start out about 5 cents a megabit download speed and eventually fall to about 3 cents. Okay. So how do we finance these networks? Our general premise is that the money is already being spent. So financing the network is an exercise of community engagement and getting the community to allocate what they're already spending in a different way. Okay, so today, based on 11,000 residential connections and based upon 2,000 business connections on average, if the residential connections were paying on average of $70, which is kind of a national average, and if the businesses were paying on average of $145, which again was the data that we got back from Superior businesses, that means of those 13,000 connections, an average of $81, which means that you are spending today $12,720,000 a year. And over 20 years, and we use 20 years because that's kind of typical for financing an infrastructure project, but over 20 years, you will spend $254 million if those rates hold over that 20-year time. As a comparison, what we're proposing at the higher numbers is an average cost to residents of about $55 for 10 times the speed, and for businesses, an average of about $75 for, again, anywhere from 5 to 10 times the speed. So that represents, on an annual basis, $3,660,000 in savings for a dramatically better experience. Okay, and over 20 years, it's a $73 million savings to the residents and businesses of Superior. And that's based upon a $70 per home subscription rate. Unfortunately, we know that you're a little bit more than that. So the question is this: of the $12,720,000, if that money, for the most part, were to stay in Superior and the costs were to come down, what would that do from an economic vitalization and economic growth perspective, and just a general, increase of tax base and everything else for the town and city of Superior? Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out is this: right now there are a number of federal funds that are flowing to counties and to cities. A number of the cities we're working with and a number of counties we're working with are planning on taking those funds and at least partially devoting those to supplementing the cost of their network, thus driving down the cost for all subscribers on the network. So, for example, we don't know exactly what Superior can expect to get from the COVID funding package, but we know that Douglas County is getting $8.3 million in COVID relief funding, which again is part of the the structure behind that is definitely can be earmarked for broadband expansion and broadband upgrades. And then in addition to that, last week a bill was introduced in Congress to the tune of $1 billion specifically for broadband related projects. And the interesting thing is one of the options that is identified in the bill as being, receiving favorable treatment as far as the grant applications is if the network is an open access network. So that is also something we should look very seriously at to see if Superior can get allocated some of those funds to help offset, supplement the cost of the infrastructure bill. Okay. Now, going back to this exercise, there are some industry experts, we don't know if this will be the case, but they believe that the current state and the way that we're going with the increases we've seen over the last few years from the telco and cable incumbents, that we're headed towards a $100 per month internet bill for residential service. We don't know if that's true or not. There are articles written about it. I'll let you read those. But my point is this: today, you guys are already halfway there at $86.53. And it's not likely that you'll go down from there. You may stay stable there. So what we're proposing is a tremendous trade-off for the residents and business owners of Superior, and that is help us finance the network, and we'll lower your cost from 86 to about 55, 50 to $55, and we'll take your speeds from 100 to 200 megabits up to 1,000 megabits. Okay. Then finally, we wanted to share with you the results of the survey that has been going on for the last year. So right now, well, at the time that the broadband plan was published last month, there were 538 respondents to the survey. Of those, you can see how the numbers break out. 96% of the respondents said that they would be in favor of the city doing this type of a network. Either yes or possibly I need more information. And 3.9 said, no, I don't think the city should be involved in this. Okay? As far as other questions related to broadband, when asked if internet speeds were important, 98% said that they were important or very important, so the two higher categories. Less than 1% said it's not important. The average connection speeds are 67 megabits download speed and 10 megabits upload speed. So from an averaging perspective, we're talking more than 10x on the download speed, and we're talking, dramatically on the upload speed, because we're recommending a symmetrical gigabit, so 1,000 up, 1,000 down. Okay. As far as choice in ISP and whether that's important and internet plans, again, 5% felt that was not important, but 94% thought it was important or very important. And then finally, how do you rate your current ISP plan? Over 50% of the residents and businesses in Superior rated their current internet experience as either poor or fair. Finally, the recommendations and next steps that we have presented to the CIT committee and now we present to the city council is: one, we start a community engagement, education, and listening tour, because again, we need to find out to what level people are interested in this project and being involved and willing to be part of financing that, because financing is an exercise of take rate, which is an exercise of community involvement. Okay. The second is, we think we know there are grant opportunities coming online. We think there will be more, so we think those should be researched. And that if there's any opportunity for Superior to grab some of those funds, we should do so, because it'll just help offset all of the cost of the network. And then finally, eventually issuing an RFP process for design build, so we can actually start hardening the numbers in the broadband plan, because the numbers in the broadband plan are pro forma estimations. They are not hardened numbers, right? So going out to an RFP process will allow us to get actual bids back from contractors, from design and engineering firms, to start hardening and refining those numbers. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions we can answer for you?
Okay, we will go into questions and discussion. Councilor Elm.
Well, I don't have any questions at this time, but I wanted to thank Devin and Jeff for this presentation and their efforts on putting together the city's broadband master plan. I also wanted to thank city staff for their hard work to get where we are today. So far, this is only a draft plan, and I do realize there's still much work to be done with this. Moving forward, we will include exploring grant and additional funding opportunities and their impacts to lower the overall cost. We will also have future listening tours and education for the public and businesses so they can define and share what this means to them. Ultra-fast fiber broadband has the potential to transform our city, with providing the opportunity to connect citizens, businesses, and the greater community to provide more choice and faster access to services. Education services could be extended. Healthcare can be digitized further, thus improving quality of life for patients. Affordable and additional options will also help solve the digital divide. Government services can be moved online, increasing efficiency while making it easier for citizens to interact with municipal government. And in an increasing and competitive market, availability of ultra-fast fiber broadband can play a huge part where residents choose to live and where businesses decide to set up and operate. While other fiber models do exist, it's important to understand the differences and the benefits that the automated open access model provide compared to others. Overall, this model can help increase a choice and lower costs. While we continue to plan and gain public input, I truly do look forward to one day having one of the most advanced networks in the state of Wisconsin and being a shining example to other communities. So I just want to thank everyone again.
Thank you. Mr. Cox, could I ask you to stop sharing your screen? I need to see the council just a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Further questions or discussion? Councilor Fennessy.
Mr. Cox, can you, going back to the survey information, it seems like you chose that wisely, which statistics to pull out. But am I understanding it right that on the survey, the one question was, do you support broadband? And was the option either no, or the second option, either yes, I support it, or need more information?
So I'll be happy to read you the exact question from the survey, if that's helpful. So it says, hang on, let me get to that. Oh, give me 1 second. Sorry. Let me make sure I pull up the survey. So the question you're referring to is a question that reads, the city of Superior is considering building a fiber optic broadband network throughout the city that would be open to any and all private sector service providers for internet access, voice television, smart home, and other services. Would you support the city owning and operating fiber network infrastructure if it facilitated more internet choice in a competitive environment, faster internet speeds, and lower prices? And then the choices were no, I would not support that. Probably, I need more information, and then yes.
In your presentation, you conveniently lumped in probably need more information and yes, I strongly support this together.
Correct.
What was the breakdown there between
Well,
yes?
I actually list them all. So 72.1% said yes, 22.68% said possibly I need more information, and 3.9% said no.
Okay. And then the other question I had about the data is in your presentation, you said that 50% of the people are not satisfied with their broadband. Would it be safe to assume that that would leave 50% that are satisfied with their current broadband option?
Well, again, in the presentation, and you have this in your packets, so you're welcome to look at this at any time. So 16.1% said poor, 34.57% said fair, 31.78% said good, 13.1% says very good, and 4.46% said excellent. So that's how that breaks down.
Okay, so only 16% rated their current internet as poor.
Correct. If you add poor and fair together, that's where you get the 50%.
Would you also get 50% that are happy with their current internet? I guess just
sure.
so
If you group good, very good, and excellent together, yep.
Right. So just so I'm following here, the two big problems that we're solving with this would be price and speed. Is that fairly accurate?
And reliability. I mean, I think most of the people that we've talked to so far in Superior, the cable plant is fairly stable. I think there are some issues with the DSL plant, and which makes sense because it's a much older, it's been in the ground longer. So those are the three things that you're going to solve for. You're going to solve for reliability, you're going to solve for speed, and you're going to solve for cost.
Okay.
I would add, this is Jeff Christensen, I'd add that fiber optics are inevitable. So I will say over the next 10 years, the majority, and I'm going to say upwards of 80% of the country will get fiber optics. Just because the technology is superior. The question is who will own the fiber optics? And so that's part of what's being solved here as well, is will the city choose to leave it as a private incumbent that controls the infrastructure and the service? Or will the infrastructure be treated more like essential utility infrastructure and go over into the public hands? So it's, I think it is inevitable that it's just like electricity. The whole country is going to get fiber optics. It's partially a question of who will own and control the fiber optics.
Okay. So if we go off
and how much you'll pay for it.
Yeah. So if we go off of the speed, right now I look at myself. I'm working from home full time, been for the last year. I've got 3 girls who are schooling virtually 2 days a week. In the evenings, we've got multiple screens going, multiple people running Netflix. And I've never been in a position where I say, boy, I could really use some more bandwidth. So is this creating a solution for an existing problem that we have? Or is this creating a solution on the backbone of a $31 million bond that we're anticipating might arise in the near future?
Jeff, I'll let you throw in on this. I'll just say that there have been many communities throughout the country. I can't speak specifically for Superior, but I think there have been some areas of Superior that have struggled dramatically with connectivity issues because of COVID. Because the parents go home, start doing video conference calls, and then the kids start doing video conference calls. And there are numerous articles out on the web, you're welcome to look them up, that talk about how they have really struggled because the current networks were never designed to have the kind of upload traffic that we've experienced this last year with COVID.
Right. There's no doubt that other cities are having that, but let's focus in on Superior because that's who we're tasked with.
Right. So the reason why Jeff said that we believe fiber will be deployed throughout the entire country in the next 10 to 15 years is because the applications that are coming around the corner are such that you will experience the challenges with the current infrastructure. And that's not me talking about, that's the CEO of AT&T saying that. So again, Jeff, if you want to come in and.
Well, yeah, I think your questions are good and they're perfectly valid questions. I think an important part of the debate or the discussion or the dialogue is this essential infrastructure? And up until now, from a policy point of view, as a country, we've treated internet infrastructure as a nice to have. We treat it like a luxury item. And I think COVID has started to change hearts and minds on whether we should continue from a policy point of view to treat it as a nice to have, because the reality is we live in a digital economy. So, we really do welcome these kinds of questions and this kind of debate. And we've made ourselves available to the city council for one-on-one sessions, and we'll continue to make ourselves available. And then we'll, as part of the community engagement listening tour, we'll have public forums for these kinds of questions. I think infrastructure for any community, it's always good to be a step ahead of what's going to be needed from an infrastructure point of view. You don't want to, I don't think, personal opinion, I don't think you want to lag what is going to be needed from an infrastructure point of view. And there are, what you pick a field, medicine, there's a dominant trend toward hospital at home, which doesn't mean that I'm doing a Zoom call with my doctor. It means I'm going to leave the hospital and go home with an IV pump that needs to be monitored by the hospital reliably. So that's one, we could spend hours talking about healthcare trends. The electrical grid is going to be connected to fiber. It's going to happen. We're moving towards transactive energy, and where there's a strong push towards renewables and clean energy. And to successfully manage that and monitor it, the grid is going to be connected to fiber. So, I think it's a fair question to say, are we sort of speculative on the need for fiber? I think that's a valid question. I think it should be part of the dialogue. But we're firmly convinced that A, fiber is going to be necessary, and B, that every city is going to get it.
Okay, I just have one last question. With this, let's say let's go down the road that this is an enormous success. You guys, we get the 60% utilization. Everyone who wants fiber signs up for it. What role does entry point play in after, like, moving forward?
Yeah, so we have two sides to our business. One is the consulting arm, and then the other is a technology arm. And part of the next steps, so we were not we were not in the meeting when the committee chose to recommend open access. And in the report, you'll see that we go through 10 different models. The open access thing is kind of a simple question, and I think it's the question the CIT committee asked is, do we want one internet service provider added in the community, or do you want multiple? And that's kind of a, we weren't there, but that we've never had a city say, oh, we'll take one when many is possible. So the open access model was recommended, we do have a technology that offers open access, and the only one in the country that's automated, which means that people can switch their ISP on demand. But we have not put into the plan an assumption that Entry Point would be that provider. We've put in an assumption that the city would do an RFP for the technology platform. And so that's part of the go forward process that's written into the plan, is that at some point, if the city gets to that point, that there would be a public process to make that decision.
Okay, I think that possibly where some of my hesitation stems from is we've never hired a consultant before who ends up being awarded the job at the end. It would be super unusual for us to hire a consultant and come with, circle back with them and say, yeah, you guys did it. So I think that's where a lot of my hesitation comes from is I look at this as we basically paid Entry Point $18,000 to develop a robust sales pitch, for this program. And that's not a jab at you guys, because you guys are only doing what this council asked you to do. But I'm apprehensive to get excited about moving forward about bonding $31.5 million on the recommendation of someone who's going to come out as a partner in this. So I just
those are fair questions. We charge $2 per subscriber per month on our technology
just a
side.
minute, Mr. Christensen. Mr. Fennessy has the floor.
No, that's it. I just think we're, as a city, there's so many unknown questions right now. I think we're in way over our head, and I think we need to step back, pump the brakes before we start bleeding the taxpayer dollars on this. Wait till it's a problem that we need to solve instead of trying to create a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
Is there further discussion or questions? Councilor Sutherland.
Thank you, Mayor. May I direct my questions towards Mr. Christensen Cox? I've been working with you guys for a while here as the co-chair of the IT committee, and Councilor Elm, I want to thank you for everything you've done and all the energy you put into it. And Tyler, I know this is your passion. I've mentioned this before. I do understand that we do need faster internet speeds, but now we're boiling down to the point where, we have a huge community where I don't know if 500 respondents is enough to gauge that big of a project. I hope we don't use those numbers as, I hope moving forward, if we go down this road, we ask for the public's input on this. And I've asked that before as an advisory referendum of some sort to get the public's input, but to start pushing, I love the idea. I'm going on record saying that. I think it's a great idea. We do need faster internet. I understand it's going to be the future, but I want to make sure that the taxpayers, the tax base of this community understands that if this doesn't work, we're going to be like in the Kestrel situation or something else where we're going to be paying it off for years, which I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that never happens. But we need to understand, I think my district, I would have a hard time supporting this without my district asking it on a ballot as an advisory referendum. That's just me. I don't know where any other councilors sit on that, but I don't want to be ran out of town on a $31 million project that didn't work. And I hope it works if it goes that way. If we do go that way, I know it's the early stages, but I hope we do it right and we ask our constituents if this is what we want to do. That's all I ask moving forward. Thank you.
Further questions or discussion? Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for presenting this. Tyler, for you doing the work on it. I've been trying to get my hands around this to ask the questions, and it's almost like the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. I'm still trying to record general, not specific questions, general questions relating to this. One broad aspect of it is how would we go about any $31 million project? What general questions would we ask? what general criteria has to be met. And then specifically, we would go in, if this were the one, we would then follow up with more specific questions for the broadband, and then far more specific, getting down to that. I'm up to general broad questions, around 28 questions right now. 28 bites, okay? I think I've got another 28 to go, okay? And so I'm not there yet, and I'm concerned. 31 million, maybe that's the basement figure. I think that if this is the $31 million that we decide to spend, we've got to do an awful lot of homework. We've got to spend an awful lot of time, because if we make the mistake, $31 million, I haven't looked to see what our bonding, where we are, and I'm sure we're okay with that, but that will seriously affect what we do in the future with anything else. This isn't just, this is what we do today is going to broadly affect the future. And so we've got some big time decisions to make and to spend time on it. And so that's where I'm coming from. So thank you for offering that. I did not respond to your offer to meet with you, General, whether it be one-on-one or two-on-one, but I respectfully would like to do that at some time when I get all my questions down. Thank you.
Further discussion or questions?
Mayor Matt.
I'm sorry, Councilor Kern.
I want to thank you guys for the presentation today. I've been following this as much as I can, with not fully knowing all about fiber and understanding the broadband market. As a business owner and a resident, obviously, in Superior, nobody likes to pay more than they have to. So I like the concept and the idea, but a $31 million price tag and having my constituents have to pay for it is something that, like other councilors have said, something that we need to really address and talk about before we move forward. I understand that we're going to have some listening sessions. I want to kind of go back to your survey, or not so much a survey, but your presentation tonight. I've seen a lot of your numbers where basically every single household and business in Superior had 11,000 and 13,000. Do we know, or do you, either one of you gentlemen, know what the actual subscription rate is in the city of Superior? Is it a full 100%? I don't believe so.
Well, the 11,000 doesn't represent 100%. So we've carved off about, I think total households is 11,800 if I remember the numbers right. So we didn't go 100%, but no, we don't know what the actual, how many homes in Superior actually subscribe to internet service. We anticipate, like in most cities of your size, it's a very high percentage, but we don't know the exact numbers.
Yeah, it's probably a 90 to 95% number. On the pro forma that's on the financials that are in the report, I think we used a 60% take rate. And that assumption is based on a 10x increase in speed and a 25 to 35% improvement on costs. So, as you acknowledge, we're still early in the process. This report is really the first step of due diligence. I think a key thing that will really affect whether this goes anywhere or not is the community engagement effort. And ultimately, the community engagement effort will be an attempt to talk to everybody and to get people to weigh in on would they subscribe and would they participate in this effort. So, the 500 that responded to the survey, that is a pointer. It's not I don't think any decisions are going to be based on that. So I think, the community engagement, we believe the community engagement is the most important part of the process. And it's, success is, as Devin said, is driven by take rate, which is the number of people that ultimately sign up. And take rate's really a function of value. And so if we can build the value into what people get, then it's reasonable to assume that the take rate will be there. But we're gonna go figure that out.
That's my biggest hiccup, is that take rate, 60% take rate in a market that might be only 60% of current residents utilizing some sort of internet service, and to expect that we would potentially take all 60% from an open market industry, and that has me thinking I'm not sure about that number.
Yeah, so so I know the 31 million has been talked about in the press. I think it is important to keep grounding this in what's being spent today. How much is leaving Superior today? So it's not thought of as a new number. But the ultimate number, whatever it is, if the city goes forward, will directly correlate with however many people sign up. So one question is, what is the infrastructure cost? Another question is the network sustainable from, on an ongoing basis without subsidy from the city? And then lastly, a question that the CIT committee answered is, would people be forced to participate? And the CIT committee was strongly no. So it's not going to be a new tax. It's, the city really, the role they play is as an enabler to improve a media that really is central to the economy now. So I think your questions are good. I think you should keep asking those questions, and the proof's in the pudding.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Mayor Payne, this is Councilor Van Sickle.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Cox, I was recently looking through your emails and found an email as far back as 2018. So you've been involved with this council just about as long as I have. And I'm a little shocked to hear this discussion going the way it is. But I certainly support my colleagues. I think oversight is one of our most important charges. But I think equally important is we have to lead with innovation. And I don't think that fiber or broadband is really dreaming beyond the stars. It feels very basic, almost as basic as a water line, or picking up the garbage. And I believe this council passed unanimously a resolution supporting infrastructure, that internet be viewed that way as a regular utility. And I'm a little concerned that I hear some fear mongering around the price tag. So my question though is, a lot of times Superior is viewed in the context of the Twin Ports. Has there been any interest from Duluth? Is that a possibility? Does that drive costs down? How does that work if that were, I guess if that was of interest or a possibility? Thank you.
So I can tell you that last week, the Economic Development Council in Duluth reached out to me and asked me to set up a call. And last week, we had our first call with the Economic Development Advisory Committee in Duluth, that's working very closely with the mayor's office and the city council in Duluth. They've been kind of given this task of researching broadband options and technologies for municipal broadband in Duluth. I can tell you that they like what we covered from a general concept perspective. I think they're very interested in doing a similar process that Superior is involved with right now. And if they decided to move forward, then yes, there would be great synergies between Duluth and Superior if both cities decided to move forward with a municipal broadband infrastructure, deployment. Now, how that would look and the numbers around that, it's too early to tell at this point.
Okay, thank you. And just one follow-up, how important would you consider quality internet to a thriving business community?
Jeff, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, it is a digital economy. So, and we're just at the beginning. I mean, I know people think we've had the internet for a long time. We are at the beginning. The emerging economy is an economy that's going to be rich with artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies and the Internet of Things, and the economy 25 years from now will be vastly different than the economy today, and all of that change will be digital. So, you know, it's no longer a debate on whether the fiber optics are the future media. It's true that a lot of the country still has cable, but all of the coaxial cable will get replaced. It will, just because fiber is so superior. So, you know, we have a bias because of who we are and where we sit, but I think what we're saying is not out on the edge. I think it's well understood.
Is that all, Councilor Van Sickle?
Yes, thank you.
Any further questions? Councilor Ludwig.
Yes, I just have a question. I know I've read through all the material, and I know there are cities that have already implemented this open access. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess for our sakes and our residents' sakes who like to do research, could we have a list of those cities who already have the open access? So,
Sure.
so if anyone wanted to communicate with them about how their open access is going?
Yeah, so there is a whole section in the report on that. We can add that question to the website and put that information in there. There are at least 3 kinds of open access. One's a dark fiber open access, one is what we call manual open access, and one is automated open access. And there are live examples of each kind, and we can provide that information both on the website and to the council.
Okay, thank you. Because of course, information is education, and
Sure.
we want to educate our constituents on this as much as we can. Thank you.
Yep.
Further discussion? Councilor Sutherland.
Just one last thing. So, we are throwing around a big number, 31, 32 million, but I think when it comes to that, you would do this out in sections, if my mind serves correctly, right? Like try an area, or would you just would the whole plan be to do the whole city at once?
As I'm writing down a lot of people's
Yeah.
questions, Councilor, I'm gonna go into a little bit of what our process would likely look like, but that's one option. Yes.
Yeah, right. So I was just, I understand the big picture is 30-something million, but if we want the option of going neighborhood by neighborhood, it's not as much as a burden than bonding for the whole thing. If that makes sense. I mean, I don't know if we're going to go out and say, here's $31 million, put fiber optic down every street. I'd hope we'd start with the pilot area like we talked about and see if it's a success and move district by district or area by area from there. But again, I love the idea. I do. Now we're here. Now the questions are going to be asked. There's no such thing as bad questions in this one. So I encourage anyone, if you have questions, ask them, because this is something we're going to have to. You're going to be. All of us will be asked wherever we go from someone. What's going on with broadband? How is this going to better? We have to ask these questions. So I don't think there's a dumb question here on this on this item particular. But I just hope moving forward, whatever we decide, and I know the best interest is in everyone's minds. What is this the right thing we need to spend money on? And if it is, let's go that route. We got to have a lot of more conversations on this. So. But again, thanks, Mr. Christensen and Cox, for everything you've done, and Councilor Elm especially. Thanks for that. It's a new idea that I've never. We're going to have all these questions because we've never seen something like this before in Superior or Duluth or within a couple hundred miles of us. So we're going to have a lot of questions, and I don't think those questions will stop for a while.
And we encourage you to ask them. In fact, let us know if you want to put together a private educational session. We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions or discussion?
So just a thank you to both of the presenters. They did a great job.
Thank you, Councilor Bender.
Thank you.
Councilors, I want to go a little bit into our process here, how this will play out. Obviously, this is a substantial question. This is the creation of a new public utility. I believe the council understood that. We passed a resolution to that effect, that we do recognize broadband as a public utility in Superior, but that this really is a very substantial undertaking, one we haven't taken on in over a century. But we have a number of public utilities within the city that are controlled by the city. We have paved streets and sidewalks, sewage system, stormwater system. All of those took a council deciding to do that, and to my knowledge, none of those were unanimous at the time. There were considerable questions. In fact, I remember when Chris Carlson was taking me through our largest stormwater tunnel in the city, and eventually sent me articles on the creation of the wastewater system. Even that was not unanimous, and the risk was literally a cholera outbreak in the city of Superior, and several councilors shrugged that off. But the lesson that we learned from the creation of public utilities takes a long time, and it requires quite a bit of information. And I'm a little bit biased. I'm ahead of most of you in this information. My first meeting was not even really with Councillor Elm, but with his brother. Councillor Elm was there, and it was quite a bit easier learning this stuff from Entry Point than from Travis Elm, who really hits you with a fire hose of information if you give him an hour. But the next steps, of course, it's to follow Mr. Sweeney's recommendation and take down this elephant one bite at a time. I would encourage all councilors to do what Mr. Sweeney implied he was doing, was just to write down your questions, submit them either to my office, to Councilor Elm as the chair of the CIT committee, or if you can, directly to Mr. Cox and Mr. Christensen. Take a look at the plan as well that is on your agenda tonight. The CIT committee came up with a number of questions as well, some pretty detailed questions. So even some pretty informed people, after hearing this presentation once, came up with a lot of questions. And so you may find some of your answers already in there. There's going to be a lot of misunderstandings along the way, and we'll do what we can to clear those up. Obviously, at no point will I support putting a $31 million bond in front of the council in the hopes that it would be paid back. We're going to finance this in much more responsible ways. But the next step, while you're generating your questions, we have to get those from the public as well. The contract for Entry Point requires them to conduct listening sessions with the public. I've encouraged them to use that as a teaching opportunity to tell the public what this really is, because it's complex and it's confusing. Make sure they understand what they're potentially buying into, and then to pull their questions from them. Hopefully that should give us a good sense of where the public really stands on this. If and when we are convinced of some pretty broad public support, we'll start moving forward on financing plans. There's a number of ways to pursue that. I am very encouraged by a lot of federal legislation that implies we could get much, if not most, of this funded directly by the federal government, so possibly very quickly. So I'm really not worried about the cost. As they pointed out, this pays for itself. Taxpayers don't spend any money on this. It is only user-funded and has the potential to be very successful. I, of course, see it as an economic development tool as well. It's a couple years in the making. We will go slow. We will answer questions as they come up. I think that's all I have, unless there are further questions for the presenters or me. Councilor Fennessy.
I do just have a question, more for you than anything. The next step you said would be like the listening sessions. Is that?
Yes.
At what point do we want to do some kind of like a bond analysis to figure out if we can bond for this money, how are we going to bond for it, what capacity that does for any of our future bonding, if worst case scenario this doesn't work out and we're stuck with the bonds? At what point do we do that before we start talking to the public, getting them all excited, only to turn back and realize that this is a massive risk that could literally bankrupt the city if we're going to have to bond for the entire thing and the project fails like it did in Madison? At what point do we do a bond analysis just to kind of figure out, is this even something that we're even capable of moving that next step, even if all of the listening sessions are super positive?
Well, we're going to do a bond analysis for the budget. We present our debt position for the budget. I think we do it every year, but we'll certainly be doing it this year. But we're not going to be considering a $31 million bond on spec. That's the proposal that Entry Point put out uses the city's bonding capacity for individual users to take out the loan. So the city's not on the hook for the loan. The user is the one paying it, and it's tied to the property, much the same way a PACE loan or a housing grant, a housing rehab grant from Northwest works. So the actual person receiving the service is the one paying for it. It just the only reason the city's involved in that is because the city can get a larger and better offer. So we're always secured. There's always security for it. But even that, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to finance it. Obviously, I think we're going to get quite a bit of grant funding. I think that's a pretty critical component of it. And it's a matter of scale. You know, we would, as Councilor Sutherland pointed out, we may look at it in a smaller scale, unless of course the demand is overwhelming and people actually want to sign up and take out this debt. But $31 million is simply not the question.
So I get what you're saying, where we pass this on to the homeowners attached to their property taxes for 20 years is the plan here. What happens if this fails in year 2? Are you still going to expect the property owner to pay that back over the next 18 years for a service that we installed but it failed?
Well, if we get a 60% take rate, then people will have agreed they will own their infrastructure. The infrastructure will be built. Then it can't fail. It's actually working at that point.
It can't fail. Well, that's what they thought in Madison too.
No, Madison didn't get an appropriate take rate. They built it in advance of people. If I'm describing this correctly, they built it in advance and then went out and asked people to subscribe to it, and they didn't, or they just didn't get the take rate. Is that correct?
Right, I think they got 15 homes.
Can we ask the consultants the information on Madison? What happened there? The difference, and I mean, it's a completely different model too.
Yeah, so Madison was a project completely different from the approach that we're talking about with Superior. The goals were completely different. The objectives were completely different. The approach was completely different. So basically, Madison was a very, very small project, about $500,000, for the purpose of bringing better broadband connectivity to the underserved and the low-income housing apartments inside of Madison. Okay. The biggest reason why, at least from all of the reports that I was able to find, newspapers, news reports, and everything, the primary challenge was that the people building the network could not get approval from the landlord of the apartment buildings to actually put the fiber in the apartment buildings. Now, why they started building a network, why they even put a shovel in the ground, before they understood that they needed to go to the landlords and get permission to bring fiber into their buildings. I have no idea why that was not understood and but that's essentially, the network was shut down because they didn't have connectivity into the apartments of those low-income, households that they were trying to help. Well, it's not even the same thing. But anyway, and that's also described somewhat in the Q&A, the question and answer document you have in your packets.
So I certainly appreciate that approach much better than how Madison approached. Instead of going off of a build it and they will come mentality, let's get them to come and then we'll build it. So I mean, I certainly appreciate that versus how Madison did that. But what are we going to? So we keep talking 60% take rate. Define take rate for me. Is that somebody saying, yeah, I think I would like this, or is that somebody saying, yeah, I'll sign on the dotted line, put that on my taxes,
Yes, that's my understanding. Take rate.
So it would be 60% of the homeowners signing a contract saying, yes, install this before we actually start going down this road?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so Devin talked about hardening the costs through an RFP process. Once we harden the costs, so initially we're going to ask for a show of interest, which will be something as mundane as provide your email address and we'll provide you updates on the project. Once the numbers are hardened, the way we see the process is first aggregate everybody who voluntarily says, I am in. If the city does it, and these are the numbers, I'm in. And then from there, our recommendation will actually be to use local college students to go door to door and answer people's questions. That'll be after we've done webinars and we've done hopefully in-person meetings and various other outreach. But then go door to door to answer people's questions, not to pressure people, but to provide the information and to answer their questions. We're identified with what's called the Ammon model. And part of the Ammon model is this idea that you don't go on, let's build it and hope they come. It's that you go get them and make sure you've got numbers, then you build it. And that's a key piece of the strategy here is let's make sure this is a sustainable network, then build it.
If my understanding of the financing too is that 31 million presumes all of the users in the city or rather at a 60% take rate, they are fully financing the network. The users are fully financing it, correct? Yeah. So it could be significantly less than that if the federal government is financing a portion of it.
Yeah.
Or the state government, we're talking about it just as aggressively.
Yep.
That's all.
Devin mentioned, sorry, Mayor, Devin mentioned a $1 billion, he left off a couple of zeros. The federal bill is 100 billion for broadband. It may get pulled into a bigger infrastructure bill, but right now the discussion is around a $100 billion national investment into broadband. So just to support what you're saying, Mayor.
That is all I have, unless any other questions popped up. Mr. Cox, Mr. Christensen, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.